because he came out and he's like, hey, you working on my beer walk-in? He's like, it was all iced up, so I just hosed it off with the hose. I told him, I said, dude, don't ever use water on those units. And he's like, well, I've seen you guys do it. And I said, yeah, because we're technicians and we know how to turn the equipment off. He goes, well, it's off right now. I said, no, it's not. It's in defrost. I said, you could have gotten electrocuted, dude. It's no joking matter. And he kind of laughs it off. And I go, I don't think you realize the severity of your actions. I was like, dude, you could have died. Like, no joke. Don't hose stuff off. And he's like, well, you know, I thought since I saw you guys, and I said, you thought wrong, dude. I said, I don't mean to be rude, but this is a serious matter. Do not ever hose electrical devices off, period. And anyways, but you got to watch out, man. These guys are nuts.
This video is brought to you by Sporlan. Quality, integrity, and tradition.
We were called out on a beer walk-in that's iced up. And I think they said a fan motor was bad, but it doesn't look like it. So I'm thinking just an iced up beer walk-in. Now this is electric defrost. That coil over there has a little bit of frost, but it makes sense because this coil right here is right by the door. So I bet you they left the door open. But we're gonna throw this guy into a defrost from on the roof and see what happens. See if the electric defrost comes on and everything. All right, so this is my control system for the rack. System C as in Charlie is my beer walk-in. So that's this guy right here. The time is somewhat accurate. It's 7:30, that's about right. We're gonna throw this guy into a defrost. Okay, and then we need to get the meter out and check to see if we're sending power downstairs. This unit uses a defrost clock and a defrost contactor. The defrost contactor won't pull in typically until, see how this one has an auxiliary contact? This is the compressor contactor, this is the defrost contactor. This auxiliary contact will not allow this one to pull in until this one disengages. So let's go right here and we're gonna check between 1 and N. 202 volts, okay, that's good. Now we're gonna check between N and 3, that's the defrost circuit. 202 volts, okay, that's good. Now let's confirm that we do not have refrigeration circuit in and 4, and that is a problem. We should not be simultaneously sending power through the 4 terminal and the number 3 terminal. That is a bad defrost clock. And it almost looks like it's like burnt in the top or something. So we need to start by changing that defrost clock. Next question is the contactor up here actually engaging the heaters or not? So we'll get my meter out and we'll check. That scared the crap out of me. What the heck was that? That was a... What the heck? That has nothing to do with me right now. That's the condenser fan motors for the entire rack. Ooh, that was sketch. And that person saying making noise, that hasn't been like that. Wow, okay, so we might have a multiple thing going on here. That scared the crap out of me. All right, so I turned that off, so now we're gonna be going off on high pressure on everything else. So actually what we're gonna do, let me turn off A, B, E, F, we'll leave the ice machine, D can go off. Okay, so the only thing running is system C right now because I don't know what's going on with that condenser fan motor contactor over there. So let's test across this guy. Okay. Okay. Go here to here. And we're, the contactor's closed and the heaters are running, but it seems like the refrigeration circuit is still running too. Something is odd about that. 4 to N. Yeah, that's weird. So we definitely have a clock issue, so we're gonna start there. All right, I turned off power and we pulled down the clock and we clearly have a burnt terminal in the back. So definitely a bad clock. I don't know what that was because it doesn't look like it's burnt there, but who knows. Anyways, we're gonna proceed with replacing this clock and then we'll further troubleshoot. You gotta really pay attention to what you're doing and don't just slap things in. see that bracket? From previous experience, I know that those brackets can be dangerous with these defrost clocks. If you look at them, the old clock is different than the new clock. Look at the top of that one, okay? And then look at the top of this clock. You see, you can very easily mount this thing to that bracket, and that top conductor right there would short to ground. So the old clock had these little stubs on here, and they're just pressed in there, okay? It's these guys right here. They pulled right out, and I'm very carefully pressing them back in. That, or you have to use these standoff adapters that come in the defrost time clock itself. So you gotta think bigger here, and don't just assume that you just slap in a clock and call it a day, because you're gonna get a big surprise when you turn it on. All right, we've got the new clock installed, and very important, I put a jumper between 1 and 2. Now, the way that this one's wired up, it has to have a jumper. You see there's a jumper there between 1 and 2. So if we come over here to this schematic right here, what we're gonna see is that 1, you see, now there doesn't have to be a jumper there if you wire it up a different way, but basically 2 is the common for the 4 contact. And we need to power 2 up so it can deliver power to 4 that way. If we have nothing going to 2, then that is a dry contact and it's not gonna do a single thing. So in our situation, the way that we have it wired up is main power, line 1, comes into 1 and it jumps over to 2, okay? So that's why main power, the red wire coming into 1, and then we have a jumper from 1 to 2, and then now that powers the number 4 contact, which is our refrigeration circuit, okay? So with that being said, we should be able to turn this guy on and test the defrost process, and then we'll have to figure out that later. So let's go ahead and hit 1, 2, 3. Please don't blow up. There's 1. We've powered it. There's 2. Okay. Now, power to the compressor and power to the defrost contact. We got to wait for the compressor to pump down. Okay. And then the defrost contactor will close. So right now, if we go to the top of the defrost contactor, we have voltage and it just closed when I got my hands on there. So now we're applying voltage there, but we should not have voltage between N and 4. And we do not, okay? So before we had power between N and 4 and N and 3, and if we look at this right here, N is your common, right? That's line 2, okay? And if we wanted to check on whether or not the defrost clock was working, if we checked between 4 and N, that would tell us that this switch was closed. But the way that this clock works, it's not possible for the number 3 switch to be closed and the number 4 switch to be closed. The logic doesn't allow it unless something happens and we had some sort of a short or well, it looks like the contact shorted when it burnt up or something. But so now we should be running in the defrost circuit. Now we don't know if all of our defrost heaters are working. What we're gonna do, look at that, 33 amps. Okay, so there's a lot of defrost heaters in that guy. We're gonna let that run for a while. I'm actually going to increase the defrost time. And while I'm troubleshooting that intermittent contact right there that was opening and closing, I'm gonna let this guy run in defrost. But what we're actually gonna do is turn this off and we're gonna disconnect the X terminal and isolate it so it can't time out a defrost. So I went ahead and isolated the X wire. Okay, the X wire works as a defrost termination switch. And what it does is the coil is wired in such that if the coil, evaporator coil, any of them gets too warm, it has a thermostat inside of it. It's a click-on relay and it sends power up, and there's a logic module inside the timer itself, and it will terminate defrost. It'll take it out of defrost. So if you're ever trying to let the electric defrost do the work, which is the way this one works, I disconnect the X terminal temporarily while I'm gonna be working on other things, and then I'll go check to see if it's making progress de-icing the evaporator. So we're gonna let that run for a while, and I'm gonna go get some gauges and we're gonna troubleshoot why that contactor was pulling in and out. All right, now I just had a discussion with one of the staff because he came out and he's like, "Hey, you working on my beer walk-in?" He's like, "It was all iced up, so I just hosed it off with the hose." I told him, I said, "Dude, don't ever use water on those units. And he's like, well, I've seen you guys do it. And I said, yeah, because we're technicians and we know how to turn the equipment off. He goes, well, it's off right now. I said, no, it's not. It's in defrost. I said, you could have gotten electrocuted, dude. It's no joking matter. And he kind of laughs it off. And I go, I don't think you realize the severity of your actions. I was like, dude, you could have died. Like, no joke. Don't hose stuff off. And he's like, well, you know, I thought since I saw you guys, and I said, you thought wrong, dude. I said, I don't mean to be rude, but this is a serious matter. Do not ever hose electrical devices off, period. And anyways, but you got to watch out, man. These guys are nuts. So anyways, this guy's still defrosting, okay? I'm hooking up the S-Man 480 manifold right now. And really important, number one, you always loosen the packing nut, okay? So I got in here and I loosened the packing nut. That allows it to actuate and it doesn't wear out the seals as fast. I did the same thing on this one. And I zeroed out my gauges. You always make sure that your gauges say 0 before you apply pressure. You don't want to put them on and then open up the valves, because then they could be, you know, not accurate, right? Because sometimes if you change elevation and different things like that, your gauges could, you know, need to be zeroed out, right, to atmospheric pressure. That's why you, when there's no anything hooked up, if it says 2 psi, you hit 0 pressure. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna turn on just the walk-in cooler. So when I was up here doing this, right, this was the contactor that was intermittently turning on and off. If I follow that down, that's motor 1 and 2. Motor 3 is on its own contactor. So I believe it was that one. We're gonna verify. That would be the first 2 motors right here, okay? And that would be basically these 3 walk-ins right here: walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer, beer walk-in, maybe the cook's drawers, and then the other 2 would be the last motor. So we're gonna turn on just the condenser fan motors right now. So that would be this guy right here. All right. And we're gonna turn on system A, which is the walk-in cooler. Now each one of these guys has a fan cycle switch right here, okay? Fan cycle switch on each compressor. They're wired in series so that if any one of those closes, it turns on the fans. So we're going to dig into those right now and turn it on and see what pressures the condenser fan motor turns on at. So that guy just turned on. So we come over here and we're gonna wait for our head pressure to go high enough for that fan cycle switch to turn it on. Turned on about 240 psi and it didn't turn on and off. That's interesting. All right, the fact that it didn't pull in and out when it turned on makes me think that the problem is not with the contactor. I'm thinking the problem is with one of those pressure switches. The question is, which pressure switch though is the difficult thing. We don't know which one potentially is causing the problem, but we need to keep going down the line, turning on compressors to see when it does the problem. If it's gonna do it again is the question, you know? It just had gone into defrost, so I turned it back on, so this will give us another opportunity to test the pressure switch just for that compressor. Now it's important that I'm not turning on the other compressors, because I want to test each pressure switch individually to try to figure out where the potential problem is. So we're just waiting. It's 216 psi and it just turned on, no problems. So I don't know that the problem's with this pressure switch. So let's go ahead and move on to the walk-in freezer compressor, which is the next one that would potentially be tied into these fan motors. All right, now we're gonna try system B, which is the walk-in freezer. Let's come over here and look at when this guy kicks in. Well, again, we're testing the fan cycling control to see when going to turn it on. Turned on about the same, 240, and it didn't chatter. Both running fine. That's very interesting. So, where's this problem at? This is very interesting. I mean, is it possible that it's with my system that I'm working on? The beer walk-in? Because that one should be part of this circuit too. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and take this guy out of defrost. It's all defrosted. and everything's on. Come over here, it should be calling. There we go. And let's see what happens if this guy's the culprit. And it turned on just fine. That's interesting. So I guess it's possible that because this guy was energizing refrigeration and defrost at the same time, that maybe that has something to do with it. So I'm pumping it down again to see what it does. It's interesting because I can't duplicate it, but we know it was with these fan motors, which is going to be these fan cycle switches. So it's pumping down right now. Let's see what it turns off at. So the compressor's already turned off, but we're looking to see what the fan cycle switch turns off at, because the head pressure is going to continue to drop as the condenser fan motors run. It's interesting. So about 160 psi, which I'm a little intrigued by those cut in and cut out pressures, but it is what it is. So I can't duplicate this problem. What the heck is going on? Last one, we're gonna turn on the last compressor. I don't think it has anything to do with it, which is their little cook drawers right here. Okay, so we got that guy turned off. I'm gonna turn it off completely. And then we're gonna go to system D as in David. Let's turn that one on and see what condenser fan motor system D turns on. Now I don't have gauges on that one, but if system D is part of the third one, which I think it is, shouldn't have anything to do with us. Now we have everything turned off. All three of these are turned off. So if these fan motors turn on, we know that it's part of that circuit. Oh yeah, so it's these fan motors, but it's not chattering. This is so interesting. So interesting. Okay. So system D is right here. So what I'm doing here is when I turn them off, I put them into defrost. So they pump down, and then I take them out of defrost. That way they're not just sitting there open. So we're gonna wait for that guy to cycle off, then we'll turn on the other ones and see what fan motors turn on when the head pressure comes up on those ones too. All right, it just shut off, and fan motors just shut off. So what we're gonna do is turn off system D, and then we'll take it out of defrost. I'll fix that in a minute. Now we're gonna turn on system E as in Edward. That's the next compressor. Okay, so we're gonna wait to see what fan motors turn on with that one. So we know that 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a small one back there. So far, all turn on those two motors. So I'm trying to figure out which one turns on this motor. We're gonna find out as soon as this guy gets its pressures up. Now I don't have gauges on it. We're just waiting for the motors to turn on. Okay, so that one turned on this motor, okay? And then this one is gonna turn on that motor too. So these two compressors are gonna be on the third motor, and then these ones are gonna be on those 4 compressors right there. So I can't duplicate this problem. I'm trying to figure out in my head, is it possible? I guess it is possible that it had something to do with the defrost clock issue, because I was troubleshooting and it was technically engaging the refrigeration circuit. So maybe something funky was going on there. But okay, well, we're just gonna go ahead and proceed with checking the box out. I need to run downstairs and see if this guy's completely defrosted, and then if so, we need to hook up the defrost termination back into the circuit. System C is still in a defrost. The red light's on, okay? What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna turn it off, okay? And I'm gonna hook up the X terminal. When I hook up the X terminal and turn it back on, it should terminate defrost immediately. All right, we're hooked back up. There we go. Look, it just clicked. It just went into yellow because it clicked out of defrost because the defrost termination wire was sending power up. So it's just the thermostat down in the coil. and when it gets too warm, it sends power up and terminates the defrost. So we're gonna make sure all the clocks are set back correctly, and I think we're good for now. All right, I checked, it's de-iced all the way through. All the heaters are working, the temperature's dropping in here, so we're good to go for today. And we'll just tell them to keep an eye on it. This guy's nice and good. I don't know what to tell him. I mean, it's possible that had something to do with this wire that I fixed a while back. You know, that loose connection could have caused something with that. It's hard to say, but it's working. I couldn't duplicate the chattering contactor, so that's all I can give him today. I got a bunch of calls lined up, so it's time to go. We'll just tell him to keep an eye on it. So the defrost clock, you know, those happen. You know, who knows? It could have been the electrical wire that, you know, messed up on the, what is it, phase 3 coming in a while back. It could have been that. Who knows? It could have just been a faulty defrost clock. That clock looked original OEM, and I believe this rack was installed in 04, so it's possible they just had a bad clock, you know. When you saw me testing the current on the heaters, I think it was like 22 amps or something like that. That is not being ran through the defrost clock. That's why they're using a defrost contactor. They're only running, you know, whatever current it takes to pull that contactor in through the clock. So has nothing to do with the current there. You know, I don't know why the clock failed, but we replaced it. But also we were very careful to make sure that we paid attention to the standoff brackets on the back of that clock to make sure that we weren't going to create a direct short when we tried to turn the clock on. And trust me, I've done that too many times by not paying attention early in my career, that I've learned those lessons. So you always want to pay attention and make sure that you're not creating a direct short when you mount those Graslin defrost clocks on those standoff brackets, okay? Now, the chattering contacts, that's what actually concerned me the most. And I've been back to that restaurant several times working on other things, and I've yet to be able to duplicate that problem. I don't think it had anything to do with the defrost clock failure, but I don't know. It was weird that I couldn't duplicate it again, but I did my due diligence to, you know, to try to find the problem. Understanding how the system works with the fan cycle controls and how the fan cycle controls are actually all tied in series together. So that way, if any one of those compressors goes above a certain head pressure, it turns on both of those condenser fan motors. Now, there's 3 condenser fan motors on that rack. The other 1 condenser fan motor is controlled off of those last couple compressors. So, you know, it's just try your best. That's the way that I go about it. Do everything that I can. I could not duplicate the chattering contactor, but it did scare the crap out of me. But, you know, I do my best. And I could not believe that restaurant staff guy that was de-icing those coils by washing them off with water. What a dodo head. I had to talk with the management too, because he wasn't a manager. He's just like, it's hard to explain, but he's just a dude there working in the beer walk, and he's in there all the time. And, you know, for him to think, oh yeah, I'm just going to go hose everything off, you know, and it's like, man, he doesn't even talk to the management. The management had no idea he was doing that. He just took it upon himself, and it's like, dude, you could have been electrocuted, you know, and he just, his ignorance, you know, and just like, well, you know, I seen you guys do it. And it's like, that's why it's so dangerous to let people see what you're doing. And I mean, there's only so much I can prevent. I'm there working on the beer walk and de-icing it with the hose, right? Not this time, but previously. And, you know, so they seem to think that they can do the same thing as us. And it's like, man, someone's going to get hurt, you know, because most people that are not technicians that work on this equipment don't understand when the fans aren't running. That doesn't mean there's no power to it. It's just electric defrost, you know, so the fans turn off, the heaters turn on. So there's an invisible current going through those to their eyes, you know, and if they get it wet, there's potential they could have had a bad disaster on that. But whew, just got to be careful, you know, always be cautious about that stuff. So I really appreciate you guys making it to the end, you know, as usual. If you guys have any interest in helping to support the channel, the simplest way to help support the channel is watch the videos from beginning to end without skipping through anything. A couple other methods, if you're interested in purchasing any tools, you can go to TrueTechTools.com. I have an offer code Big Picture, one word. You'll get an 8% discount on checkout. Now, previously, I used to have affiliate links set up with them. I don't do that anymore. So it's just my offer code. If you want to help support the channel, all you got to do is use the offer code. Super simple. Big Picture, one word. Get an 8% discount. I get a small commission from that. There's other methods too. PayPal, YouTube channel memberships, Patreon. It's all in the show notes. There's links to all the different methods. You can also, if you're interested, go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. We have merchandise available, hats, beanies, shirts, sweaters, all that good stuff. Soon to be stickers, not quite yet, but the stickers will be, once I get around to it, available on the website too. Got a bunch of them.
So those will be coming shortly. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so very much. You got any feedback, any criticism, anything, leave it in the comments. Send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay, we'll catch you on the next one.